All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to pretend like I didn't have a bunch of technical problems trying to get this thing set up because I've never done this on Zoom before and had to share a presentation. But welcome back. Uh, it's the end of the semester, so all my professors are asking for video presentations, which is awesome for me because I've got years of experience doing this now. And so for my education class this semester, I am going to be sharing a presentation on divorce and remarriage with a bit more focus on um, education and divorce and how it affects students and their lifestyle. So, and clicking doesn't work. Boom, got to do it the old-fashioned way. All right, the most important takeaway is that every situation is unique. You never know what two people are going through, even if they are living the exact same parallel lives. It's key to remember that every situation like this is going to be different, and there's never a good reason to generalize or to have certain bias towards something like this. So even for me, coming in with a lot of personal background on this, my situation with my parents' divorce was extremely unique, and I'm now glad that I get to take the opportunity to share some of that. But there are some similarities across the board. So for younger children, we kind of start to see that they might worry that if their parents can stop loving each other, that they might stop loving them. Parents are role models for children. So when they see behaviors like this, where the connection between them is sort of starting to dissipate, then they might fear that this is going to happen to them. And it's a lot of stress to put on a child of an extremely young age like that when they shouldn't worry about um, the feelings that their parents can have for them. When we go into grade school, you might start to see that some students might worry that they are the cause. I know children at this age in development are going through a process where they're trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And so, in between that, to get to there, there's a lot of negative reinforcement. I don't want to call it punishment. There's a lot of negative reinforcement to help guide children into the right direction so they don't end up hurting themselves or others. So, while they're getting in trouble so often for all these learning moments, if there's a lot of high conflict between parents during that time, they might start to worry that one of their problems that they're having, one of their learning moments, is the cause of the discourse happening in the household, and then they're placing all that blame on themselves, carrying that weight on their shoulders. And when we get into the later years, and we've got with teenagers during their developmental phases, and biological and psychological changes are happening, they might start to feel more anger or resentment towards one or even both of their parents. And one very important note that I wanted to put on here to go along with the not having any bias and being more open-minded is that a positive divorce can be less stressful and less confrontational. Divorces in most cases are not a positive thing, and even if they are, there's a lot of stress and hostility happening during the time. But divorces can be really healthy. It's two people whose relationship just isn't working out. Like at its base factor, that's what's happening. So a really peaceful separation does and can exist, and it's important to remember to make it that way if you possibly can. If you can intervene and help in some way, it's really important to do that, especially for educators. So some common problems that are happening after divorce with children and students is that there's change in parenting style, or maybe even two separate parenting styles. The good gray area that we've been taught to remain in is the authoritative area for parenting styles, which means that there's a lot of room for growth, but there's also set boundaries and involvement, a lot of involvement from both parents. So if parents are divorced, if there's a lot of high tension in for one, or maybe even anger or resentment, that parent might lean more towards an authoritarian parenting style, which is where the parent has all the authority and there's no room for input from the child. Whereas on the other hand, one parent might be more permissive, so letting the child do whatever they want with no boundaries or consequences, and later becoming uninvolved. because by making most actions permissible for the child, uh, what you end up with is favoritism towards one parent, and that's going to get into the competition that I want to talk about here in a moment. Financial stress is another huge one that you're going to see during or maybe during or after divorce. Financial stress can split a family apart. It's a burden, especially to all of us right now. But when parents get divorced, you go from a two-income household to a single-income household. Some parents are trying to just make ends meet, and they might not even have time to spend, valuable time to spend with their child, which is why they become more distant and withdrawn from the next point, which can then turn into completely uninvolved parenting, which is where there is no communication or involvement whatsoever from the parent. The child is left completely to their own devices. Some competition can occur, like I said, if you're changing parenting styles or some other external factors happening. But in my case, what I dealt with from early childhood all the way into my 20s was this weird game my parents played where they would send me with information to the other parent. We would go back and forth, or I would be fed lies that I don't even know if today hold true or not, trying to persuade me to be full time with one of my parents. And the goal, the way I see it, is that by the end of it, whoever has full custody of the child is winning at parenting. This can be an extremely toxic thing that happens that can really diminish child's state of mind and their self-efficacy. It can have a lot of harmful consequences in school too. Changes in family dynamics can happen. A lot of the resources that I was looking at said that parents who do divorce are very likely to get remarried, and that remarriage, the second time, is likely to fail. But when you're bringing in a new adult figure to the household, or let's say step siblings come in, it completely changes the way the family operates. And now your child has gone from one mindset and one routine, and they have to flip that and figure out an entirely different one. And it's usually a pretty strenuous process. It doesn't just happen smoothly over a long course. It could be moments of discourse. A lot more impulsive behaviors are happening. We'll see this a lot in teenagers, very young teenagers, which makes it so much more problematic. There's going to be a lot more substance abuse. And what I was finding was that a lot of 16-year-old males, specifically with distant fathers, tend to have around five active sexual partners uh, for a very early age, and this can even start affecting their adult relationships, how they view other grown-ups, if you want to call it, how they respect authoritative figures like teachers, parents, law enforcement, elders, and we're going to go ahead and get into some of the problems that you'll see at school is their academic performance can start to dwindle. If there's problems, chaotic problems happening at home, then uh, the mind is completely occupied by something else, and children can't focus on their education, which really, really messes with memory and retention of information. And just like adult relationships, it also affects peer relationships. The um, the arguments or the status of relationships at home can start to be mirrored at school among friends or other peers, which would also lead into a lot more behavioral disorders when children are not given a proper channel to go through to filter those emotions. You're going to see a lot of changes happening that might not be for the best. So we've got, oh man, I keep saying so, and I can't edit this, so it's probably going to be really a lot more awkward. But I've got tips for parents and I've got tips for teachers because resources are very important. We couldn't go over problems if we couldn't find ways for solutions. But placing children in the middle is a problem. You can never try to get your child to favor one parent over the other. Using consistent discipline gets children away from the permissive parenting style and having to juggle that with another parenting style from a different household entirely, because then they're living in two different worlds. If you can try to make things blend as smoothly as possible and just have way less nuclear fallout, if we can call it that, things will be a lot more peaceful and there will be better transitions for both parents and the children. That's why co-parenting peacefully is so important. Parenting is a team effort. So keeping that 50-50 balance is super important. You're not confusing or scaring your child. And then teaching proper coping skills, you can get that from various resources, but teaching your child, coaching them all the way and talking with them all the way through the divorce so that they understand what's happening, they understand it's not their fault, that things just don't work out, and that there's going to be changes that they're going to have to overcome. And if parents can't fully help their children with this, then getting help for yourself is the very first step. And there are tons of resources out there to help get people through this extremely stressful time. And then some tips for teachers. Some of these I hadn't even considered because I haven't been in this position from a teacher's perspective before. Being open-minded, we went over that earlier, to not have expectations for your students, or else they might start to just adapt into that mindset if those negatively biased expectations are already put on them to not achieve well because of a divorce. They might not have any reason to try to push against that. In high conflict divorces, there's going to be little communication from one or both parents, whether it be financial struggles keeping them away from home or something else pulling at them, custody battles. Uh, a lot of times in the higher conflict, it's important that teachers have patience, because there's going to be times when you can't get a hold of the parents and you can't actively keep them engaged in their child's education. Remember that children may be stuck in the middle. So what they're dealing with at school, when they're wondering, how is my weekend going to be with this parent versus how is the rest of the week going to play out with the other? It's important to keep things like that in mind, where they're doing a lot of back and forth work. It's not just home and school, back and forth like that. It's going all over the place. Teachers may also be accused of withholding information from one parent if there's more contact with the other. We can use myself as an example for this. So my mom had a majority of the custody, so I would go visit my dad every other weekend, meaning she would be the main point of contact. And so if there was anything happening with me at school, my dad would probably be the last or at least second to find out. And there might be information that he's missing out on because my teachers would have given it all to my mother. And so there, that coupled with the next one we're going to go over is why it's important to just set boundaries and maybe even get a list of expectations going between teacher and parent. The next one completely shocked me. I hadn't thought of it, but students may actually ask their teachers to keep secrets that should be shared with the parents. If you have a good teaching environment, a good educational environment where there's trust and honesty and compassion, then that's when learning takes place. You have to have those things there. With that trust comes students who may feel safer sharing information with teachers that they trust more. So a form of disclosure needs to be discussed. These are things to look out for, because kids can say some pretty crazy stuff if you haven't heard them before, stuff that really needs to be discussed in the household, because it's not the teacher's job to parent, it's the teacher's job to teach. But sometimes those two worlds get blended. But most importantly, come back to remembering that every situation is unique and that the child always comes first. There is no way of comparing two situations to one another without there being some differences. And we're all just people. So even the parents that are going through a divorce are just people, or remarrying, whatever. They're just people having complex emotional relationship um, issues. That's what it is boiled down to it. So there's no blame game that can be placed on anybody in any certain scenario. It's all about how can we make this a smooth transition for everybody, and what can we do to make this as healthy and positive as possible. So thank you all for watching my presentation, and I will be posting more videos of other finals come soon. Hopefully this one worked out. Thank you.